Open footnote. The chief works on the authors are named in the article Russia of the Encyclopedia Britannica, 9th edition, page 84. Close footnote. These few remarks show how incorrect was the view taken by some early explorers of the guilds when they wanted to see the essence of the institution in its yearly festival. In reality, the day of the common meal was always the day or the morrow of the day of election of aldermen, of discussion of alterations in the statutes, and very often the day of judgment of quarrels that had risen among the brethren. Open footnote. See for instance the text of the Cambridge Guilds given by Tulmin Smith (English Guilds, London 1870, pages 274 to 276), from which it appears that the general and principal day was the election day, or CHM Clods, the early history of the Guild of the Merchant Tailors, London 1888. First, 45, and so on. The renewal of allegiance, see the Jomsviking saga mentioned in Pappenheim's Old Danish Schutzgilden, Breslau 1885, page 67. It appears very probable that when the guilds began to be prosecuted, many of them inscribed in their statutes the meal day only over pious duties, and only alluded to the judicial function of the guild in vague words, but this function did not disappear till a very much later time. The question, who will be my judge, has no meaning now, since the state has appropriated for its bureaucracy the organization of justice, but it was of primordial importance in medieval times, the more so as self-jurisdiction meant self-administration. It must also be remarked that the translation of the Saxon and Danish guild brethren, or brodr, by the Latin convivi must also have contributed to the above confusion. Close footnote. Or of renewed allegiance to the guild. The common meal, like the festival at the old tribal folkmote, the mal or malum, or the Buriat Abba, or the parish feast and the harvest supper, was simply an affirmation of brotherhood. It symbolized the times when everything was kept in common by the clan. This day at least all belonged to all. All sat at the same table and partook of the same meal. Even at a much later time, the inmate of the almshouse of a London guild sat this day by the side of a rich alderman. As to the distinction which several explorers have tried to establish between the old Saxon Frith Guild and the so-called social or religious guilds, all were Frith guilds in the sense above mentioned. Open footnote. See the excellent remarks upon the Frith Guild by G.R. Green and Mrs. Green in The Conquest of England, London 1883, pages 229 to 230. Close footnote. And all were religious in the sense in which a village community or a city placed under the protection of a special saint is social and religious. If the institution of the guild has taken such an immense extension in Asia, Africa and Europe, if it has lived thousands of years, reappearing again and again when similar conditions called it into existence, it is because it was much more than an eating association or an association for going to church on a certain day or a burial club. It answered to a deeply enrooted want of human nature, and it embodied all the attributes which the state appropriated later on for its bureaucracy and police, and much more than that. It was an association for mutual support in all circumstances and in all accidents of life, by deed and advice, and it was an organization for maintaining justice, with this difference from the state that on all these occasions a humane, a brotherly element was introduced instead of the formal element which is the essential characteristic of state interference. Even when appearing before the guild tribunal, the guild brother answered before men who knew him well and had stood by him before in their daily work at the common meal, in the performance of their brotherly duties, men who were his equals and brethren indeed, no theorists of law, no defenders of someone else's interest. It is evident that an institution so well suited to serve the need of union, without depriving the individual of his initiative, could but spread, grow and fortify. The difficulty was only to find such form as would permit to federate the unions of the guilds without interfering with the unions of the village communities, and to federate all these into one harmonious whole. And when this form of combination had been found, and a series of favourable circumstances permitted the cities to affirm their independence, they did so with a unity of thought which can but excite our admiration even in our century of railways, telegraphs and printing. Hundreds of charters in which the cities inscribe their liberation have reached us, and through all of them, notwithstanding the infinite variety of details which depended upon the more or less greater fullness of emancipation, the same leading ideas run. The city organized itself as a federation of both small village communities and guilds. All those who belong to the friendship of the town, so runs a charter given in 1188 to the burgesses of Ayr by Philip Count of Flanders, have promise and confirmed by faith and oath, that they will aid each other as brethren in whatever is useful and honest; that if one commits against another an offence in words or in deeds, the one who has suffered therefrom will not take revenge either himself or his people. He will lodge a complaint, and the offender will make good for his offence, according to what will be pronounced by 12 elected judges acting as arbiters, and if the offender or the offended, after having been warned thrice, does not submit to the decision of the arbiters, he will be excluded from the friendship as a wicked man and a perjurer. Recueil des ordonnances des rois de France, tome 12e, 562, quoted by Og. Thierry in Considération sur l'histoire de France, page 196, edition 12 MO. Each one of the men of the commune will be faithful to his conjurer, and will give him aid and advice according to what justice will dictate him, the Amiens and Abbeville charters say. All will aid each other according to their powers within the boundaries of the commune, and will not suffer that any one takes anything from any one of them, or makes one pay contributions, do we read in the charters of Soissons, Compiègne, Senlis, and many others of the same type. A. Lucia, Les Communes Françaises, pages 45 to 46. And so on with countless variations on the same theme. The Commune, Gilbert de Noguet wrote, is an oath of mutual aid (mutuo adjutori conjuratio), a new and detestable word. Through it the serfs (capitescensi) are freed from all serfdom. Through it they can only be condemned to a legally determined fine for breaches of the law. Through it they cease to be liable to payments which the serfs always used to pay. Gilbert de Noguet de Vitassoa, quoted by Lucaire, LC, page 14. The same wave of emancipation ran in the 12th century through all parts of the continent, involving both rich cities and the poorest towns. And if we may say that as a rule the Italian cities were the first to free themselves, we can assign no centre from which the movement would have spread. Very often a small burg in Central Europe took the lead for its region, and big agglomerations accepted the little town's charter as a model for their own. Thus the charter of a small town, Loris, was adopted by 83 towns in southwest France, and that of Beaumont became the model for over 500 towns and cities in Belgium and France. Special deputies were dispatched by the cities to their neighbours to obtain a copy from the charter, and the constitution was framed upon that model. However, they did not simply copy each other, they framed their own charters in accordance with the concessions they had obtained from their lords, and the result was that, as remarked by an historian, the charters of the medieval communes offer the same variety as the Gothic architecture of their churches and cathedrals, the same leading ideas in all of them, the cathedral symbolizing the union of parish and guild in the city, and the same infinitely rich variety of detail. Self-jurisdiction was the essential point, and self-jurisdiction means self-administration, but the commune was not simply an autonomous part of the state. Such ambiguous words had not yet been invented by that time. It was a state in itself. It had the right of war and peace, of federation and alliance with its neighbours. It was sovereign in its own affairs and mixed with no others. The supreme political power could be vested entirely in a democratic form, as was the case in Pskov, whose Vieques sent and received ambassadors, concluded treaties, accepted and sent away princes, or went on without them for dozens of years, or it was vested in or usurped by an aristocracy of merchants, or even nobles, as was the case in hundreds of Italian and Middle European cities. The principle nevertheless remained the same. The city was a state, and what was perhaps still more remarkable, when the power in the city was usurped by an aristocracy of merchants or even nobles, the inner life of the city and the democratism of its daily life did not disappear. They depended but little upon what may be called the political form of the state. The secret of this seeming anomaly lies in the fact that a medieval city was not a centralized state. During the first centuries of its existence, the city hardly could be named a state as regards its interior organization, because the Middle Ages knew no more of the present centralization of functions than of the present territorial centralization. Each group had its share of sovereignty. The city was usually divided into 4 quarters, or into 5 to 7 sections radiating from the center, each quarter or section roughly corresponding to a certain trade or profession which prevailed in it, but nevertheless containing inhabitants of different social positions and occupations, nobles, merchants, artisans, or even half serfs, and each section or quarter constituted a quite independent agglomeration. In Venice, each island was an independent political community. It had its own organized trades, its own commerce in salt, its own jurisdiction and administration, its own forum, and the nomination of a Doge by the city changed nothing in the inner independence of the units. Le Bret, Histoire de Venice, first, 393. Also Marin, quoted by Leo, and Botta in Histoire de l'Italie, French edition, 1844, tome 1er, 500.